Hi everyone, thanks for listening in and downloading our podcast or to InCorp Group's Pro Business Podcast series. I am Eric, the Chief Business Development Officer of the group and your usual host. And today I have my co-host, our usual co-host Elton here, as well as our colleague from our Philippines office. So maybe Elton, you want to do a self-introduction before Amanda can do hers?
Thanks, Eric. Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of our podcast series. And my name is Elton, and I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer of InCorp. And like what Eric mentioned, today we have a very special colleague of ours who is from Philippines. She is Amanda, and I'll leave Amanda to do a brief introduction about herself.
Thank you, Alton. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Amanda Carpo. I am the country head of Clark Carpo InCorp Philippines. And I am a practicing attorney, and we have been assisting foreign companies in the Philippines for the past 13 years now. So we help companies with from registration, from beginning to dissolution to rehabilitation. So I think that we're going to have some interesting conversations today about Philippines, maybe an introduction, but I will let Eric and Alton take the lead on that.
Surely, today's conversation will be interesting for our listeners today. So for all the listeners, again, InCorp Group is a Singapore headquartered company that specializes in providing corporate services as well as various forms of business advisory in 7 countries within South Asia, with of course including Philippines. So for more details of what we do and where we operate, please visit www.incorp.asia for more information. Today's episode, we will again focus 100% on Philippines. For companies out there who are looking to expand into the country, we will use again a question and answer style format to discuss some of the important points that includes general business outlook of the country as well as key country stats. We will discuss on key industries that are trending in the country or industries that will do very well in the country. We will also discuss in terms of what are some of the key states or cities that will be suitable for foreign companies to consider, whether there are favorable government policies such as incentives, such as tax exemptions for companies going into the country. And we'll just end off our session today to go through a brief company setup process. What are some of the legal entity options available in the country? So maybe Elton, I'll let you ask the first question then.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Okay, Amanda, I think Philippines is always a very interesting country, and a lot of our listeners here might have heard about Philippines and wondering how the country has developed thus far. So maybe for a start, would you be able to share with us a general business outlook of Philippines, and in particular, the country demographics, the infrastructure, the age, and the business structure there?
Sure. So the Philippines in 2021 is seeing an acceleration in trends against the backdrop of a worldwide pandemic, and this is revealing both its strengths and its vulnerabilities. Pre-COVID, McKinsey had by 2030 has ASEAN economies were slated to double, with the Philippines being the second largest contributor in ASEAN after Indonesia. And we've had GDP growth of 6.2% year on year. Then the pandemic happened. So now we're seeing a contraction in our GDP growth, obviously, along with the rest of Southeast Asia. So we're seeing a contraction of about, I think by the end of this year, about 8.5%. Nevertheless, the fundamentals remain. So the Philippines has a large domestic market with rising incomes, at least pre-COVID, population of 109, approaching 110 million people. The average age is 24 and a half years old. I was going to say 24.5.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It makes me feel very old. So I'm not part of that pool, unfortunately, anymore. But it's a large pool of cost competitive and skilled labor. One of the challenges that the pandemic has brought, obviously, with all this, digital disruption and artificial intelligence, etc., is the challenge for this labor force to upskill. Since there's going to be a widespread adoption of automation and digitization, at least that's the predictions that we're seeing. We've had some encouraging signs of growth in the Q3. We had export growth. However, we're still seeing a decline. We're hoping 2021 will be better. It will depend largely on the support of the country's health system, policy reform, and public sector support, and obviously how quickly we can get a vaccine and disperse that to this huge population.
Thank you, Amanda. I guess for COVID, it affects not just the Philippines, but to the rest of the world, as you have said. So for foreign companies who are interested or looking to invest into Philippines now, what are some of the, maybe you can share with the listeners in terms of what are some of the key industries that are trending in the country or will be successful in the country?
Sure. I think I should start off probably with infrastructure in general. The Philippine government has a build. The Duterte administration has a build program, which is aims to increase infrastructure with a view of the Philippine Development Plan up to 2040, that they want to develop transport, water resources, energy, information and communications technology infrastructure, and social infrastructure, that's housing, education, health, and solid waste management. So there are opportunities for investment in these industries. These mostly involve government products, but also private sector, because as the infrastructure grows, so will the opportunities grow. So the government is, trying to increase its infrastructure spending as well as inviting investors to come in. So I think that's number one that, in this pandemic we've seen is, again, revealing itself. Then we've got the BPO industry, which has always been a strong earner for the Philippines. So again, the challenge is upskilling. However, I think they're seeing that this industry will be growing. There's still $20 billion of business that they're predicting. They're still predicting growth in the BPO industry. So that's business process outsourcing, or IT, which mostly involves, this is everything from voice services, voice and non-voice services, and that also includes the creative industries. So that's animation, digital recording, etc. Those sort of industries. Global in-house centers. A large part of the BPO industry is healthcare. So healthcare information management. So this is a big thing here. We have a lot of nurses in the country, and these nurses are doing healthcare related jobs that are outsourced mainly from the United States. And then there's game development. Those games I don't play on the internet, and
you don't need to reveal your age.
Yeah, yeah, I know. So again, I'm not in the 24.5. The other industry I wanted to discuss, one of the big industries is mining in the Philippines. Unfortunately, so they're seeing. Literally, the Philippines is sitting on its gold. They're estimating that the gold deposits in the Philippines are among the largest. I think the second largest in the world, estimated at 101.6 million metric tons.
Wow.
Iron ore, again, predicted estimated at 298 million metric tons. And then, these limestone, marble, nickel, and minerals, those rare minerals in the Philippines. However, there has been a moratorium on new mining permits and a ban on open pit mining and high excise taxes. But the industry, this has always been an industry that they want to see grow. So the contribution of mining to our GDP in the Philippines is 0.06 and 6.3 of exports. So if you compare that to like Indonesia, their mining counts for 21% of their exports and 7% of their GDP. So we're really, really very behind in that. Though really, so the Philippines is sitting on its gold. So I think the other industries that are interesting would be manufacturing. One of the challenges of the manufacturing industry. I think we're competing with Vietnam and Thailand for manufacturing, especially that's coming from China, because China's moving out of manufacturing and or less sophisticated manufacturing. I think Vietnam has been able to capture that, and the Philippines has not. So those are the main industries: BPO, mining, and the tourism is another industry which I think has untapped potential in the Philippines. Unfortunately, tourism is one of the industries that has suffered quite a bit, heavily hit by the pandemic. We wish we could all be at the beautiful Philippine beaches these days, but it's not. We're not. There are no tourists allowed to up yet. But as soon as the country opens up, I think they're seeing a rebound in this, and it's sort of a chance for the tourism industry to sort of rethink their priorities in terms of sustainability. And again, that's also tied to the infrastructure that they need for this industry.
Thanks, Amanda. Usually the top two cities that come to mind when people are thinking about the Philippines would be Manila and probably Cebu. So are there any other key states or cities that you think might be suitable for our listeners who are thinking of having an investment in the Philippines?
Sure, yes. I definitely look into Clark and Subic. Those are the northern Luzon areas because of the airport, and that used to be a former U.S. military base that they converted into an international airport. So and there's a lot of infrastructure going around there. It's cheaper than Metro Manila, but it's nearby. And the airport and the Subic having the harbor there is definitely crucial. And these are also areas where there are tax incentives that are offered for businesses that are located there. I would also look at the Calabarzon area that's south of Metro Manila. So south of Metro Manila is where the large real estate conglomerates have had a lot of development, and they have built the infrastructure there. So there are a lot of companies, light industry, that is in the southern region, also near Metro Manila, but outside Metro Manila, but near enough. So it all depends on the transportation and we have a lot of new roads that are being built. It's just we need more. so definitely the infrastructure is key to tapping into those regions, and then outside Luzon, the biggest island in the Philippines. The government is promoting growth outside Metro Manila. It's always been the case that Metro Manila has been sort of the focus. All the jobs, all the businesses are there. So government is trying to start businesses outside, and there are some areas that are, if you start your business there, they will give you income tax holidays and incentives for businesses that are there. So that's in Visayas and Mindanao. Yeah.
I see. So while you have already touched on a little bit about incentives and tax exemption schemes, maybe you can explain to the listeners today, for foreign companies who are going into Philippines, what are some of the government incentives, or as I said, carrots that they will use to attract foreign companies to set up into the country?
Yeah, so the incentive scheme of the Philippines is still, as of now, based on export. So mainly if you're an export business that sets up in the Philippines, you're going to get an income tax holiday of 4 years, which is extendable up to 8 years. For now, there are some changes there's some legislation that's coming to sort of fine tune the investment, the incentive scheme that we have. There's also a list that comes out every couple of years the investment priorities plan. So there's certain businesses that the government is promoting. These are usually related to the government development plan. So these can be like marine culture or BPO is there, and a couple key industries that the government where they think that businesses that come in can make a contribution to technology or R&D in that area. So
I see.
So the main umbrella though is exports. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Amanda. And I think, after having said so much and explaining clearly about, how favorable the Philippines is, I think a lot of our listeners will be keen to understand, what is the best way for us to enter into the Philippines? What is the best business structure or the entity setup that we want to have? And typically how long this process is going to take, and whether there are any restrictions on foreign directorship or ownership.
So it's pretty simple. In Philippines, you can set up through a corporation or a branch. So a corporation, they've done a revision of our corporation code to make it simpler. So a corporation will require a minimum. You can have a one-person corporation, or you can have a minimum of 2 directors. And foreign companies are allowed to invest in the Philippines as long as it's not on the foreign investment negative list. But if it is on the negative list, then there are some equity restrictions depending on the industry or a capitalization requirement. For example, retail trade in the Philippines currently requires a $2.5 million investment. However, there is legislation that it's all pending to lower that requirement to $300,000 minimum paid up capital requirement.
But that would be most helpful, Amanda.
Yeah. I mean, there's all this legislation. Yeah, and in terms of the process, I mean, with the pandemic, the Securities and Exchange Commission has allowed us. I mean, we can incorporate a company remotely, pretty much. Although we will need authenticated documents to be sent at some point in time. So right now, we've been operating on that basis. So it's sort of online transactions in the Securities Exchange Commission for registration are very have been accepted, have been accepted, like forced to be accepted. So we can do a registration remotely. However, it can take some time. So we're up to like 3 to 6 months, depending, on how long or what happens with SEC.
I see, 3 to 6 months. And pre-COVID, if I didn't remember wrongly, Amanda, it takes about 2 to 3 months actually.
Yeah, that's correct. Correct.
So the COVID has actually delayed quite a bit of time for foreign companies wanting to go in.
Yeah, so because we can submit everything online, but then we have to wait for authenticated documents because the investors can't physically be there to sign papers. So we need to go through the consulate and get apostilles or authentication. So that's been a challenge, but we've been able to complete registrations. And I think, SEC is coming around to online, which really helps us.
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. I think that is very useful information for us, and I think the listeners will benefit from your sharing. So thanks very much for the sharing today. And with that, I think we have come to a close to today's podcast session. And please feel free, if you're interested, please feel free to write to any one of us, Eric, myself, Elton, as well as Amanda, if you are looking or have more questions about investing in the Philippines.
Yes,
so with that,
please.
I'd like to thank Amanda for taking the time off, as well as my co-host, Eric, for this session.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Eric. Thanks so much, Alton. Thank you, everybody, for listening in.
See you. Bye.